Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Well, it's lovely to be here with you, and hello again. When Jeff invited me to speak, I had to tell him a story about something that happened to me about 10 days ago. I grew up in Pleasant Hill, so I was out visiting my childhood friend, and to give you a sense of how long I've known her, we were together in her living room watching Ed Sullivan when the Beatles came. So, and we were in home ec together in middle school when we heard that Kennedy had been shot. So this was 10 days ago, but I went back to visit again last Wednesday. So we were also together when we heard that Donald Trump had been convicted of 34 felonies. And I thought, we'll never forget that we were together again for this historic moment. I was visiting her because she was recovering from a knee surgery. So I go out there every week, and we're binge watching The Sopranos once a week. Now my daughter told me, I'm going to tell all your Buddhist friends that you I said, The Sopranos is Buddhism 101, greed, hate, and delusion. To me, it's as good as Shakespeare. But they had a kind of temporary ramp leading from the kitchen down to the dining room. And I was trying to navigate that, and I tripped, and I fell right on my forehead. And I knew right away that I'd broken my nose, because I'm sorry, but it felt like jelly. A lot of blood, a lot of pain. And I picked myself up, and Robin's husband took me to the emergency room. I wanted to get a CT scan because it's not the first time I've fallen down. And I think about Natasha Richardson, who, she hit her head, fell and hit her head when she was skiing and didn't think much of it. And she died that afternoon. And I regret so much her death. She was a lovely person and actress, but I hope people think of that as a reminder, to take care of any head injury. A very dear friend of mine, and I don't have a brain injury, and I'm very relieved that I do not look like Robert De Niro in Raging Bull. So you probably wouldn't know. I just have a little bruising here still. A very dear friend of mine fell off his bike and is suffering from a traumatic brain injury for the last couple of years, and it's been very, very difficult for him and for everyone who cares about him. But I decided that by today, I'd be able to share with you. And, Jeff was asking me to take this spot from my Dharma sister, Pam Weiss, who couldn't be here. And so I've grown to love baseball. So I told Jeff, I'm honored to be your pinch hitter. Go Yankees. Go Yankees. Oh my God, did I really say that? Go Giants. Oh my goodness. My partner grew up in the shadow of Yankee Stadium, so he's never sure who to root for. So they put this little cast on my nose. It was bizarre, a little white cast, and it fell off after about a week. So at least the visuals aren't that disturbing. But I love to talk about what I'm practicing with myself. So I thought this might be a fruitful theme for a Dharma talk. I'm calling this talk The 1,000 Natural Shocks. So this, of course, is from Hamlet's speech, his famous soliloquy. And he mentions the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. Allen Ginsberg said it's not easy living in a human body because we're subject to the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. When I came to Zen Center, I heard of the teachings of the Buddha, that the inevitability that we're all subjected to sickness, old age, and death. But I certainly didn't think they were talking about me. So I found out otherwise. So these are Hamlet's words. I hope I can do them justice. To be or not to be, that is the question. whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. Now, Hamlet, of course, is talking about suicide. I'm not going to go that far, but you know, all the ordinary everyday suffering that we go through in our human body, the accidents, the falls, the missteps, the mistakes, the broken bones, and the broken hearts. And of course, we cause a lot of our own suffering through our own unwise behavior, our unskillful means in the world. And I'm listening right now to a fantastic memoir by Tom Robbins called Tibetan Peach Pie. And he's quite skeptical about, well, was a very young adapter of Zen Buddhism. And, but somebody invited him to consult the I Ching, and he was quite skeptical about that. You know, the Chinese oracle. And so he threw the coins and read the hexagrams, and he was so stunned by the advice the I Ching gave him. It said, be careful what you put in your mouth, and be equally careful of what comes out of it. And Tom Robbins thought this advice was so simple, so wise, so all-encompassing. In fact, he felt he never needed to consult the I Ching again. And he says it was the best advice he'd ever gotten. And he can only speculate about what his life would have been like had he taken that advice. So I'd like to talk today about practices and exercises that can be helpful when we are experiencing the 1,000 natural shocks, the things that knock us off course, you know, that make us doubt ourselves. After I fell, for a few days, I didn't even trust myself to walk. I mean, I had to, but I felt very tentative, you know. I think the last time I was here, I might have talked about another recent fall that I had at Stowe Lake, and I was walking with a friend and fell, and she took me to the emergency room. And I happened to have my book with me, The Zen Way of Recovery, an illuminated path out of the darkness of addiction. You know, I always have a book with me, but this happened to be the only book I had, and I was in the emergency room for 6 hours. So I reread my book. And you know what? It's pretty good. It's pretty good. In fact, there are copies for sale. I think a practice that I've been working with since I've fallen a couple of times. It was a little different at Robbins because of this damn ramp I was trying to negotiate. But I have this practice now walking. I hope you can imagine this and practice this yourself with my mind in my whole body, including my feet. And maybe you're feeling your feet right now when I say that. Because the times that I've fallen, I've been looking forward to something or rushing or thinking about something. I'm in my head. I'm not in my entire body. And so let's talk a little bit about the brain. I've talked about the human brain before in another context, but I think it's worth reviewing. You know, an interesting thing we learned about the brain is that we have a natural negative bias in our thinking. In our earlier days as humans, of course, when we were out on the Serengeti plain, we had to anticipate dangers to ourselves or to our families. And while this is important, you know, it's important to be aware of danger, we tend to take this a little too far. I know I'm the master of worst case scenario. You know, But every mother is, because, when my daughter would enter a playground, I'd immediately imagine every terrible thing that could possibly happen, and she would just run off and play. My daughter Nova, who just turned 45. There's a book by Robert Sapolsky called, I love this title, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. So apparently, why zebras don't get ulcers. Now, I don't know how they know this about zebras, but apparently, if a zebra is chased by a lion, it runs like hell. Everything happens that happens to us when we're in fight or flight. The difference between us and the zebra is when the lion disappears or picks somebody else to eat, the zebra stops and starts chewing grass. Their heartbeat returns to normal. And, in our case, because of our very active brains, we tend to replay negative experiences, rehearse events that haven't even happened yet, anticipate negative experiences, and after they've happened, we tend to replay them. We question the way we handle situations, and we simulate how we might handle things in the future, or how we might have handled them differently in the past. I thought a lot about this fall, and about how, if I had had a brain injury from that moment of neglect, my whole life would have changed in an instant. I know this from my dear friend, who's not the same. I'm sending this out to Ko. My friend Ko and I, for 25 years, have been part of a Buddhist puppet show. It's a musical comedy based on the Vimalakirti Sutra. So I so hope he could return to be able to do that with us. Life-size puppets. Maybe we'll perform for you someday. One thing that I noticed when I fell down is I didn't further beat myself up. I was already beaten up enough, I kind of pulled myself together, and in retrospect, I've been able to open myself to gratitude that it could have been worse, that I could have had a brain injury, and focus on the gratitude I feel about that, and about having friends that immediately took care of me, Some facts about the brain: it reacts more to negative things than to positive things. We learn faster from pain than from pleasure. And painful experiences are more memorable than pleasurable ones. There's a phrase that I've heard a lot in studying the brain. Wonderful book about the brain that I can recommend by Rick Hansen. Maybe you've read it, Buddha's Brain. A lot of this information comes from that book. And he, like other brain researchers, has said the brain is like Teflon for positive experiences and like Velcro for negative. And speaking as someone who taught children for 35 years, if a parent praised me, what a wonderful teacher you are, my child's so lucky, that would just evaporate, But one bit of criticism, and I would replay it in my mind and have conversations with that parent when they weren't there, And so I've seen this in myself, and I've tried to counteract that because we actually make grooves, literal neuropaths in our brain when we replay those negative experiences without ourselves, There's a story about a woman who decided to go over and borrow a cup of sugar from her neighbor. So on the way, she begins to think, I can just picture the look on her face when I asked to borrow a cup of sugar. I've lent her all kinds of things. Did she return that teapot to me? She didn't even invite me to her birthday party last year. So by the time she reaches her friend's house and knocks on the door and the friend opens the door, she says, you can keep your damn sugar. Someone can cut us off in traffic. Our boss says, we need to talk. We get a call from school about our child, we're waiting for a biopsy report. And we forget we're a Buddhist. We abandon the present moment and we inhabit the future tragedy that we're anticipating, So we go into fight or flight mode, just as exactly as if we really were facing a threat in the moment. Our pupils dilate, our heart begins to pound, our palms might get sweaty, our breath is shallow, and blood rushes to our hands and feet to assure that we can hit harder and run faster when this imaginary threat actually arrives, you know. So we can find ourselves, if we indulge in this kind of thing, in a constant state of dread, depression, you know, or anxiety because of this natural negative response to the world, this self-protective response. I was speaking about this to a group and someone raised their hand and she said, I thought I just felt that way because I was Jewish. And I said, well, I thought it was that way because I'm Irish. But, you know, we might say, I thought I felt that way just because I'm human, you know, because this is such a human thing to do. And we can counteract it because when we practice, we can bring ourselves into conscious contact with the present moment. You know, we are in danger of being stuck in this unconscious state of negativity or dread, worrying about the future, regretting the past, and doubting ourselves because of a perceived past failure or misstep, if you'll excuse the pun. The good news is that our brain is very resilient. You know, we used to be told that by the time you're 3, that's it, you are who you are. And we found out now that the brain is very plastic. You know, we've learned more about the brain in the last 20 years than in all our previous history because of MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, which, by the way, they've studied meditators and found profound originality and uniqueness in those meditating brains. So, you know, I'm also become grateful for impermanence, which I tend to see in kind of a negative way. You know, teeth decay, children grow up and leave home. But, you know, my child couldn't have grown up and left home and become the wonderful person she is. When she was little, she said to me, Mom, I want to live with you forever. I said, well, you probably feel that way now, but when you're about 18, you're going to want to go to college and have your own life. She says, well, if I do, remind me. So the day I sent her off to college, I reminded her, but didn't do any good. She went off to college anyway. So this is good news that our brains are resilient. And if it wasn't true, it would be impossible to recover from a difficult experience. You know, I'm watching this bruise go away and my nose return to some kind of stability. We couldn't recover from alcoholism as I've been granted myself. It would be impossible to change any of the habitual coping mechanisms that we've used in the past that no longer serve us, and may have even become destructive, you know. So let's take some deep breaths together. Breathing in through the nose and have the feeling of letting your breath extend to every part of your body. Feel your conscious contact with the chair and with your feet on the floor. Bring your mind into your feet. And when you do that, you might almost feel like, oh, my feet are waking up. And when you bring your consciousness into your hands, I used to teach biofeedback to people. When we bring our consciousness into our hands, they tend to warm and maybe tingle a little bit. See if that happens as you become conscious of your hands. Feel your breath coming in and out of your body and nourishing you. And recognizing that this breath connects us to one another and to all beings. We're connected when we breathe to the oxygen we receive from the trees. Our interconnectedness is not a metaphor, it's a scientific fact. Feel the collective goodwill in this room that's available to all of us and from our friends at home on Zoom. and coming back to one another. I feel like when we just practice for a half an hour being in the present moment. And when we stop abandoning ourselves to the present or the past and learn to live in the present moment, then when something happens to us, we're available for it. We're open to it. And I noticed this when I was injured, that I didn't have to call myself a dummy, for falling down, that I could attend to what needed to be taken care of in that moment. So we can be more available for the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to when we celebrate and enjoy and find joy in the present moment, find the joy that's available to us here. So here are a few things we can do. One, notice you're all right now. Most of the time we're okay. Close your eyes and scan your body again. And do you feel tension anywhere? I often have tension in my shoulders. Invite yourself to let go of that. Do you feel unsafe or uneasy in any way? Can you sense why you might feel that way? Are you basically all right now? Are you breathing quietly, and is your heart beating okay? When I find myself slipping into the past or the future, I try to stop and remind myself, right now, you're okay. Or whatever that imagined or remembered thing is, not happening right now. This practice is a powerful tool when we find ourselves also sinking into negativity or worry. The second thing I'd like to say sounds kind of woo-woo or new age. Love your inner child. This sounds like such a cliche, but what we know from the brain is that the things that happen to us as a child are woven into our nervous system. We carry with us all the 1,000 natural shocks that we were exposed to as a child. And by teaching children for 35 years, I knew that childhood is not a cloudy wonderland for most kids. I think I told you this before, but I would always shake my children's hand at the door before they came in the classroom, exchange a few pleasantries. And I shook Kit's hand. I said, "How are you doing today, Kit?" She said, "My life is a barren wasteland." 3rd grade, 8 years old. So, these things that we laugh, right? But I wonder why she said that too, We carry these ancient experiences around with us, and they color our world. If you were embarrassed or felt controlled as a child, or if you were criticized as a child, if you hear sometimes the critical or condemning voice of a teacher or parent, this will have a profound effect on your daily life and in our adult relationships. Today, you have a chance to be a loving friend and guide to that child that lives deep within you. And I'll tell you, just between us, I took my inner child by the hand and went to my AA sponsor and told her about the abuse I'd experienced as a child. And she said, my parents didn't respond the way I would have hoped when I told them, but she said, "You've spoken for that child now. You're not responsible for their response. You've spoken up for her." So we can develop this kind inner voice, a loving inner witness to that trauma. And, it occurred to me when I was putting this talk together that I used to be very mean to myself when I would fail or falter. And I don't do those things to myself anymore. I hope you've been able to find joy in your life and a sense of playfulness through art or sports or outdoor activities, even if you weren't, able or allowed to do those kind of things as a child. The third thing is don't throw darts. So James Gandolfini, speaking of The Sopranos, he used to put pebbles in his shoes to help him act. He was supposedly the nicest guy in the world, but so that he could act irritable as Tony Soprano. So do we put rocks in our shoes? Do we indulge in self-loathing or habitual negative thoughts? No, this is something we can apprehend when we become more conscious of how we're thinking. We're all subject to this ordinary, everyday unhappiness, the pain of not getting what we want, or of being separated for loved ones, or being misjudged or condemned by others, or mistrusted or mistreated. And maybe the most ordinary kind of ordinary unhappiness is always wishing things to be different than the way they are. When I give in to self-pity, when I wallow in regrets or resentments, and when I forget to feel gratitude for what I have, the blessings in my life, then I'm vulnerable to self-created suffering. I'm vulnerable to those negative inner voices. I can get more easily offended by what somebody says that might be very benign and not even directed at me. So when I feel that kind of pain, I can ease that by remembering, and including my injury, this too shall pass. Our difficulties are like clouds in an endless sky. They come and go. And our experience can benefit others if we reach out to them. This is especially true to those of us in recovery who reach out a hand to another suffering addict. I can share my pain with a trusted friend, and they might be encouraged to share their vulnerability with me. Or I could even just take a long walk at night and look at the stars and feel connected to the whole universe. I'm going to go on a little bit today, sorry. Number 4, respond, do not react. Recent research on the brain shows that there are 3 parts to the brain, and these parts respond in different ways. At the very center, where the amygdala is, this is the center of emotion. And this is the most primitive, reptilian, reactive part of the brain. This part of our brain is most concerned. We've been talking about this, about avoiding danger and threat. And it's surrounded by the limbic system. So the amygdala is in the center. The limbic system surrounds that. And this is more concerned with approaching rewards. The part of the, and this part of the brain recognizes opportunities and moves towards them. This is a more recently evolved part of the brain. And the even more recent part of the brain is the cerebral cortex. This part of the brain is interested in attaching to others. It moves in the direction of asserting ourselves and affirming ourselves as social beings. So when we feel safe and fulfilled and content and loved, our brain's emotional and avoidance system is calm. The part of the brain that approaches rewards is contented. And the part of the brain that attaches to and loves others is stimulated and caring. So this peaceful place is our home base and our resting place. So we would do well to visit this place frequently. We can do that in meditation. When we have strong emotions like anger, shame, or guilt, or tension, or irritation, or disappointment, the more punitive and primitive parts of our brain go into this state of stress. So the most available and immediate thing we can do when we're in those conflicted states is to stop and take 3 deep breaths. I do this when I'm at a stoplight. So let's take 3 deep breaths. And I want you to stop and notice what a profound effect that has. thing is to not take things so personally. This is one of the 4 agreements, by the way. Maybe you're familiar with those. Notice how your mind and body feels when you feel offended or criticized. Be careful about assuming that you know what somebody else intended. And be curious what might be going on with that other person. Have compassion for yourself and the other person. Recognize that this situation isn't permanent and will change. And notice the peace and calm you feel when you choose not to take things so personally. See, we often forget we have a choice. We say, well, this is just the way I feel. This is just me, I'm going to skip a couple things and just skip right to say yes. So there are things we should say no to. No to abuse. No to manipulation. No to humiliation. No to giving up on ourselves. But let's find out the things we can say yes to. And this might even be things that we used to say no to. It's very easy to say yes to what we like. Maybe we could even say yes to things we feel neutral about. But can we even say yes when we don't get what we want? Can we even say yes to things we used to say no to, like mushrooms? Not psychedelic mushrooms. No, when you're a child, you don't like mushrooms, and then when you're adult, you suddenly do. Can we find a sense of surrender in saying yes to life, even when we don't like what's going on? Can we open to the feeling that we are basically okay? Can you say yes to your childhood? Can you say yes to the decisions you've made in the past? And even if they were unwise decisions, they might have led to wiser decisions. Can you say yes to the people in your life? Say yes to your feelings and your thoughts when they arise. You know, we tend to think, oh, once we're practicing Buddhism, we shouldn't be angry. We shouldn't be sad. That's not what the Buddha taught. Say yes to the different parts of your being. Say yes to your entire body, just as it is. So, and of course, being glad and grateful, opening up to gratitude. So I'm going to stop there, even though I had a lot more to say, but goodness gracious, I've kept you long enough. So I'd love to hear, what your response is to some of these teachings. And, I'm glad I came today because I feel kind of raw and vulnerable, and I've learned a lot from my experience of falling flat on my face. So, and I can laugh about it now. So time plus tragedy plus time equals comedy. So I can laugh about it now. So I would love to, I even laughed about it with my sponsor. I said, I was tired of being just another pretty face. So please share with me whatever might have arisen for you, and you get extra credit for me first. And also, we'd love to hear from people at home if you have questions or comments or experiences you'd like to share with us. Hi, Bill.
Don't give me a Bob.
Bob.
I'm impressed with your memory and jealous of it. In the beginning, you mentioned about the 1,000 shocks to the body.
Mm-hmm.
Does Buddha or Shakespeare talk about the 1,000 shocks to the mind or emotional harm?
Well, I was including them.
Oh,
Yes, I was
okay.
including them when I said that the heartbreaks and the broken bones and the disappointment. So thank you for highlighting that, because of course that's part of the 1,000 mental shocks. And of course, Ophelia, had that heartbreak, and they both died. Everybody died in the end, right? And a lot of that was those shocks, and that some of which Hamlet brought on himself. I took my friend Robin and I saw West Side Story together, and she turned to me and said, "Wow, this is a lot like Romeo and Juliet." Yeah, so when Hamlet kills Laertes, that leads to so much suffering. There's a lot of impulsive behavior in Hamlet, that leads to further suffering. So yes, of course. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, unshakeably offended. I was flying back to LA, and they called for bags because they were going to be short of room space and airplanes. So I took out one bag and he said, "Oh, you don't have the right to carry on, so you'll have to give us $65, and we'll stow your bag." And it's the sense of victimization. When did this happen? When did this start to happen? That people can't carry on, carry on. It's when did second class become, the lower class?
Yeah.
And it's just that it's minor. I can afford it, but it's hard to shake. She said I should have read the terms of my contract. I said the small print. But I keep replaying it, but I should have made a scene in front of all the passengers and said, "This is what JetBlue is doing."
I was hoping you would reveal the name of the airline. Thank you.
JetBlue, beware. Minor suffering, but it's sticky.
It's sticky.
Yeah,
It's sticky. It leaves a residue.
yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
I was also worn out by sharing a room with my big sister, who has fallen a lot. So now she's really slow to walk to her house and her funeral. But anyway,
Oh dear, yeah.
yeah. So she takes very small steps, and I say, "You're walking like an old lady." She says, "I am an old lady."
You know, I got the great pleasure of practicing with Thich Nhat Hanh in southern France, and he's famous for walking very, very slowly. I wasn't with him in New York City, but his attendants were. And they told me, you should see the look on the face of New Yorkers when Thich Nhat Hanh is walking a half step at a time. You know, I don't know if you saw Fran Lebowitz things called, think of it as a city, when she rushes past people who are walking like your sister on the streets of New York. Yeah, that can be dangerous. You know, my friend with the brain injury is walking very slowly now, and it's kind of wonderful to be patient and to walk with him, you know, it's challenging. It's challenging. Yeah. Yes, Jeff.
Thank you for a very revealing and teachable talk. I've had a number of falls in the last 14 months in particular. When I was in Bali, a year ago in February, I fell backwards down these steps at night and had 5 broken bones. And I appreciated my meditation experience at that moment. First of all, okay, quick check, I'm still here. I don't think anything. And then body scan, okay, this arm is working. You know, once the cast and Michael working with but I was so it was really essence experience, you know, really basic, like, okay, I'm halfway around below the equator. I sure hope they have good care. But I didn't get hysterical or anything. It's just like, okay, there's something that you have to solve. You know, I know I need to get help. Probably checked out for broken bones, and it'll work out. It'll work out. And what kept coming to me was Vinny Ferraro's mantra. Right now, it's like this. Right now, it's like this.
Whose mantra?
Vinny Ferraro.
Oh, I love that. Right now, it's like
this.
this.
I mean, it's the best offense for impermanence. You know. Yeah, another one is pivot. But the message is right now it's like this.
Jeff, are you okay now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I still have a dislocated shoulder. Still. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I wish you full recovery.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But it's made me very fine. Walking meditations, which are very good. It's, you know, steps are really is an ancient place if you pay attention.
Yeah. You know, in the monastery, we sit for 7 days in a row called a sesshin. course, there are breaks for meals, and we do walking meditation. And it becomes very clear that walking meditation is just meditation in movement. And it's wonderful to carry that practice into our everyday lives, even if we're not walking terribly slowly, but to walk mindfully with our mind and our whole body. Yeah. And as we age, it becomes even more important. Yeah. I'm just looking at you because you fell down, not because you're aging, because of course you're not.
In an earlier comment about traveling luggage, I thought of a quote from, there's a book, Jewish Buddhism or Buddhist Judaism, and it says, wherever you go, there you are. Your luggage is another bag.
Say it again. What's the last one?
Wherever you go, there you are, but your luggage is another bag.
Is this from the Jewish haiku book?
Maybe I would,
That sounds like a haiku to me. I mean, I read that, but my favorite one as a mother of a child who got her nose pierced. What a lovely nose ring. Excuse me while I put my head in the oven. Apologies to Sylvia Plath. That's a wonderful book. It might be from that book, Bob. Maybe, yeah.
I'll look again.
Yeah, yeah. Say it again. I love it. Yeah.
Wherever you go, there you are. Your luggage is another bag.
As someone whose that luggage has been lost, I really appreciate that. Yeah, you arrive and then you wait for half an hour at the carousel.